Welcome back, everyone. If you've been digging into economics for even a few weeks, you've probably felt a little bit of friction, right? You look at these beautifully drawn charts, these complex equations, and a little voice in the back of your head whispers, wait a minute, the real world doesn't actually work like this, does it? Well, today, we are facing those skeptics head-on. We are looking at confronting objections to the economic approach. By the end of this explainer, you're going to see how economics truly views the messy, complicated world we actually live in.
Let's start with a very practical question. And just be honest with me. The last time you went to the mall or, hopped online to buy a new pair of shoes, did you sit down with a piece of graph paper, draw out a budget constraint, and mutter to yourself about maximizing your utility? Did you calculate the precise marginal benefit, like the exact amount of added happiness of those sneakers versus a new jacket? Of course you didn't. And honestly, neither do members of Congress when they're voting on massive annual budgets. The real world is just incredibly messy.
So here's our game plan for today's explainer. We're going to cover 1. The unrealistic economics objection. 2. The basketball pass analogy. 3. The selfishness objection. 4. Facts versus opinions. 5. The universal trade-off diagram. And finally, 6. Your real-world choices.
Okay, let's just dive straight into our first module. Section 1. The unrealistic economics objection.
So this objection basically argues that the economic approach to decision-making requires way more information and careful, calculated planning than human beings actually possess. Critics point to the math and say, look, people, firms, and society simply do not act like this. And honestly, they have a point. The messy ways people actually operate rarely look like smoothly curving production possibilities frontiers. But economists argue that this objection kinda misses the point entirely.
To gently correct that assumption, let's move right along to Section 2 and a really intuitive analogy, the basketball pass. Imagine you're dribbling down the court and you throw an absolute perfect bounce pass to a teammate. If a physicist wanted to describe that exact pass, they'd have to write out a massive, complex equation, computing the speed, the trajectory, the weight of the ball, the bounciness of the floor, the whole shebang. Now, as the player, did you do that intense math in your head? No way. You used practice, skill, and instinct to make that pass. But, and this is absolutely crucial, just because you didn't do the conscious calculation doesn't mean the physicist's formula is wrong. The formula perfectly describes the reality of what just happened. In the exact same way, someone shopping for groceries instinctively knows how to maximize their utility through practice, even if they never literally draw out an economic budget constraint. It just becomes second nature.
That brings us to Section 3, the selfishness objection. Are humans purely selfish?
A lot of critics argue that economics portrays people as purely self-interested, and therefore it's just this immoral, cynical way to view the world. But let's actually listen to Adam Smith, the literal father of modern economics, from his book The Theory of Moral Sentiments. He explicitly points out that no matter how selfish man may be supposed, there are evidently principles in his nature that interest him in the fortune of others. Even the founder of economics knew that humans are deeply altruistic. Assuming people are purely self-interested is really just an analytical simplification. It's a starting point for analyzing decisions, not a complete picture of humanity. Now contrast that altruism with Smith's other wildly famous concept from The Wealth of Nations, the invisible hand. Here, he argues that when people do act selfishly, like say a baker selling bread strictly to make a profit, they inadvertently feed the town. By pursuing their own interest, they create products that society desperately needs, accidentally building a more prosperous world. So self-interested actions, like seeking profit, can actually build a much better, more functional society. It's a pretty fascinating paradox.
So how exactly do economists keep their own moral judgments out of their work? Well, that brings us to Section 4, facts versus opinions. To understand this, you gotta realize that economists essentially wear two completely different hats. The first is the scientist hat, where they make positive statements. These are factual, testable descriptions of the world exactly as it is. For example, the proposed subway system's benefits exceed its costs. We can mathematically test that. But then there's the citizen or philosopher hat, where they make normative statements. These are subjective opinions based on personal values describing how the world should be. For instance, arguing that a rich country should extend COVID-19 unemployment benefits to take care of the less fortunate. That is a moral opinion. It's a valid one, but it can't be mathematically proven true or false. Economics, as a discipline, really tries to stay rooted in those positive, factual statements so that policymakers can base their decisions on reality rather than just ideology.
Moving right along to Section 5, the universal trade-off diagram. This is the core academic model you're going to see over and over again.
When you study economics, you might feel totally buried under an avalanche of different charts and diagrams. But here's a little secret for you. They are almost all the exact same diagram, just wearing different labels. Whether it's an individual's budget constraint or a whole society's production possibilities frontier, they all illustrate three undeniable truths. First, scarcity. That's the fundamental problem that we have unlimited human wants but strictly limited resources. Second, trade-offs. The inescapable reality that if you want more of good A, you absolutely must give up some of good B. And third, economic efficiency.
Let's zoom in on that last one. Productive efficiency is that exact moment, that exact point on the curve where it becomes literally impossible to increase the quantity of one good without decreasing the quantity of another. Imagine a factory making cars and trucks. Productive efficiency is the point where you simply can't make one more car without taking parts and labor away from truck production. It's the point where we stop wasting scarce resources and start getting the maximum possible benefit from what we have.
And finally, Section 6. Your real-world choices. Let's take all this high-level academic theory and apply the framework right into your own living room.
Let's apply this to a choice a lot of you are actively making right now, pursuing higher education. An economist wouldn't just look at the price tag of college tuition. No, they look at the massive, multi-layered trade-offs you are making. Yes, step 1, you pay tuition and room and board. But look at step 2. You are also forfeiting years of working and earning a full-time income. That foregone income is a massive opportunity cost. Step 3 involves intertemporal choices, meaning you're borrowing money right now and paying interest in the future. And step 4, you are actively choosing to delay your current consumption. You're living like a broke student today in hopes of having much higher consumption in the future. See? Without even realizing it, you are already instinctively calculating incredibly complex economic math. Ultimately, economics isn't about perfectly selfish robots calculating math equations at the mall. It's a lens. It's a tool to help us clearly see the realities of scarcity and the true weight of our decisions. So, look at your own life. Look at the things you want most in this world. And ask yourself, what is the true opportunity cost of your biggest goal? What are you actively giving up right now to achieve it? Really think about that. And you're already thinking exactly like an economist. Thanks for joining today's Explainer, and I'll catch you next time.